Hey everybody, welcome back to Slow Your Roll. Please forgive me. I'm still sick. I smell... or rather, I don't, because I can't.
That's the best intro we've had. What's up, everybody? I stink.
One of the things that's been on my mind recently is how I really have not perfected the exploration pillar in D&D. So I've been diving into this topic, and then me and Alex got together on it, came up with a bunch of stuff, and here we go. So we're going to look at how to perfect the exploration pillar in D&D. So there's a lot to this. The whole idea of exploration being something that is maybe directly linked to travel. It doesn't always have to be that way. Exploration could be as simple as just any encounter that isn't combat or social. So if your players need to sneak into someone's house to get a key or something like that, technically, that can be your exploration pillar in the game. But if that doesn't feel as good as you want it to, and you want to really dig into making your players see Avatar for the first time, that kind of exploration, then here's some tips for that.
For immersing your players into your world, you should probably develop a backstory or some sort of history for the world. That does not necessarily mean that you have to have everything set in stone, or even your locations and your story being mutually exclusive. You can superimpose your story on any locations, but just make sure that you know what we're talking about when we ask it. So let's say we're walking down the road and we see a old dilapidated temple, and you happen to have some history or backstory for something that's a bit broke down and could be put onto the temple. Now we're going to go through that storyline or plot thread in this specific thing that we've found. And it's not necessarily important until it is put right before you.
Yeah, that's huge. So throughout this whole list, you're going to see a lot of the ways that if you can manage to make your campaign plot threads or plot hooks fit in any location, it's going to be huge in you improving the way that you handle exploration in D&D. So another thing you're going to want to do is flesh out the geography and the climate of your world, like flora even and fauna of the world and things like that. So this is going to be something, you don't have to be full-on Tolkien about this. Like, you can just maybe be inspired and create something in the world that's specific and interesting. And a lot of this, again, if you can just place your players' willingness to explore a specific area and then be able to adapt your plot threads to that, it'll help you make a lot of the geography right there on the fly. So again, all of this is really only going to be super impactful if you can find ways to create interesting locations for your players to explore. There's going to be a lot of methods through this list that help you do that, but that's going to be another key thing. Create the places that your players want to explore so it isn't pushed on them and it feels fun and good at the table.
So if you were going to encourage your players to explore certain locations, you should provide rewards for those locations. And if you were going to have your locations thematically match your treasures and rewards, all the better. A magic pearl inside a clam should probably be in the water temple. And if you were looking for a giant molten rock, you're probably not going to find that at the bottom of a swamp. So just make it fit.
Yeah, and again, this could be things that aren't necessarily your direct plot threads. Maybe you put something on the map and your players just find the name of the place interesting and they're like, I really want to go to that place. Perfect. You hooked them. Now reward them for going to that place. If it is some ruined water temple, they technically are just going because they want to. There's no quest to go there. Put a quest reward there regardless. You find the pearl. Maybe they get some awesome powers to breathe underwater or control water elementals or something like that. For your players to be able to do this, you're going to want to find ways to give the players freedom to explore at their own pace, not being restricted by the way that you needed the campaign to play out.
The good old railroad.
Yep. Everyone knows about it, and everyone kind of wants to escape it, right?
When setting the scene, you should often think of the five senses. Maybe not necessarily taste and touch, but sight, sound, and smell is super important when describing any environment. But let's be real, you want to taste those. If you were going to set the scene, you should probably have it be a little bit more descriptive and detailed, and the more detail that you're able to provide without being boring about it is the more things that your players are able to latch on to. If you start describing every single tree, your players are going to fall asleep. But if you just happen to describe this one tree, then they're going to be like, what's up with this tree? And they've got to check it out.
Exactly. Why's this tree special?
Right.
Why do you say there's this tree? Trees everywhere. It's a forest. So in your descriptions of this specific scene that the players wanted to explore, you're going to want to say things maybe like, instead of, it smells really bad. Okay, sure, like that communicates that it smells bad. But when you say the putrid smell of rotten flesh hits your nose and turns your stomach, that's so much better than it smells bad.
Right.
If it's something you're not good at, I mean, maybe it's actually worth just taking time to find out how to be better at it. Because if you do, you're going to captivate your players.
And if you're not good at it, check out our sponsor, Describe. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah, right.
Or somewhere in your descriptions, maybe you can find ways to actually have the weather and the terrain and things like that feel like something. Maybe you're in an environment where there's acid rain in this jungle area, and you're in some sort of encounter with goblins, and it starts acid raining, right? And everyone's like, oh, this is terrible, but at least the goblins are going to be hurt too. No, they're not. They live here. They're used to that. Only you are.
Right. The environment can play a huge role, and not a lot of people have the environment affect the party. A lot of people just have the party infect the environment, which can kind of be seen as a missed opportunity. Like he said with a plain old little goblin encounter, nobody's scared of those. But when the acid rain starts and you're taking 1d6 damage every single round and the goblins are running away and making it hard for you to hit them at all, that's a pretty dangerous encounter, and it's only like 3 goblins.
Exactly. Instantly turns up the encounter interesting factor hugely.
And this can be described in pretty much any setting too, like radiant damage when an angel shows up, or like poison damage for a swamp. You could think of like acid rain. There's like firestorms, blizzards, almost any type of weather. Sandstorms could be incorporated to your environment. And I guarantee your players probably did not prepare for blizzard, rations for the blizzard, or comfortable clothes to take care of that as well.
Yeah. This takes the whole idea of like, the weather's cold, you might have to make constitution checks every now and then, way past that, to, again, maybe where there might be firestorms and things like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And these are going to be in environments where the creatures are probably used to this kind of weather and have found ways to adapt to it, or at the very least hide from it. And your players are not. So that could endlessly be interesting.
Right. Could you imagine the classic D&D combination of like taking the person's helmet and then heating that right up, but this time you're using it against your party? Because like you've got like a fire frog or something, and they jump on the back of like your fully plate mailed person, and now they're burning. They're just got to get that off. Or someone's got to get that off of them.
Yes, for sure. That is a really interesting way of taking the whole heat metal concept and completely changing it.
Right. If your players can use it, so can you.
Okay, so head on to the next point. In these areas that your players are going to be exploring because they're interested in it, because you've managed to nail every step up till now, in these areas, they're going to need to face more than just combat. And the weather's a good kind of segue into that. There needs to be obstacles also. There needs to be traps that fit the environment and feel right. I suck at making traps.
And I'm right in the same boat. It's really hard for me to describe an area and say like, oh, don't step on that square. Because I basically am like, all right, you walk into the room and there's a trap 3 feet in front of you. And there goes the usefulness of the trap.
Right, exactly. It's so difficult for me, and I get this 100%. It's so difficult for me to take the image of this awesome elaborate trap that's in my head and describe it without it sounding and feeling like Pitfall from Atari.
Yeah, seriously. Or some kind of Rube Goldberg machine made by Tom and Jerry.
So we should be better about that. And if you are going to be building these areas, maybe take time to, like I would have to, take time to develop a trap that fits in the environment and feels like a good part of it. A simple example I can think of right now is maybe just like an unseen quicksand area of a sandy part of a jungle or something like that. Quicksand, classic, part of the environment, but really it's just a trap.
Right. And a lot of things about traps that kind of suck, right? When people walk into a trap, it's one person, they didn't have a chance to dodge it, or it's just like a random, like, 10 damage.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was a weird and kind of not nice inclusion.
Yeah.
You know? So if you were gonna have a trap happen, let's just say the trap activates in the whole room to everybody. Or maybe the trap is something that's not necessarily, well, you just get stabbed real quick. You actually have to do something in a multifaceted skill check to be able to overcome this trap.
Yes, for sure. That's huge. I think that the Dungeon Coach actually has a video where he talks about traps and passive perception and stuff like that. It's like, instead of, I think he actually stole it from another person, but he references them.
What's original noted?
Right, come on. But instead of having a player step on the trap and then fail the save and then get hurt, or succeed the save and get hurt a little less, instead of that, maybe find a way that they actually see the trap before it even happens, and then immediately it becomes a skill challenge to overcome it before it happens. That's a cool idea, and it might help you to build a trap that fits your environment better without just, doing damage to your PCs.
Right. And let's just say you did go with the situation where a trap only affects one person who happens to be in the front, and that person fails. Maybe the person right behind them is able to save them with a slightly harder, like, DC check or whatever.
Like that. Or like a skill check with some sort of disadvantage because you're moving quick, you're acting on behalf to try to stick your shield in front of these darts that are flinging at your friend.
100%, because, like, I definitely just failed my dexterity check, but he better get this strength save to make sure he can pull me out.
Yes, exactly. The truth is, it doesn't feel good if a trap just hurts a player, and the description's terrible. It's not thematic for the place. At that point, it'd be better if you didn't have traps.
And in that aspect, a trap might be better incorporated into an encounter as well. So that way it's seen as a utility of who you are fighting, not just a random from the DM.
Ouch, it doesn't feel good, see? But like anything in this area where your players are exploring, the concept is that you need to reward them for exploring. So if they're in this place, you set up the trap and everything else, let's say they overcome it. However that looks, doesn't even matter, but however it looks, make sure that it is a reward to the players for exploring this place at all.
And the reward probably shouldn't be, all right, you don't die.
One of the simplest ways to achieve the idea of making your players want to explore your world is just including maps. I mean, good maps and visual aids for that matter. So maybe more than just maps. Maybe if they are exploring this area that's a jungle with quicksand and everything else, you actually find an awesome image online somewhere of this fantasy jungle, even if it's just a quick flash of the players. Like, it looks something like this. Doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be a battle map right there on the spot, just a quick visual reference.
And if you were gonna have a battle map, that does actually help to make your job a bit easier too. Oftentimes in these battle maps, I just said it's a route that's got some trees on it. But on the battle map, there's an overturned wagon, there's 2 or 3 down trees, there's something somebody can jump or swing on, there's so many different creative things that a player can make from specific maps. So like when you have your own kind of maps, it's pretty cool if you can make your own and you have that ability. But there are so many free maps online, or even if you wanted to pay for some of the more cool animated maps that can really give you some detail and your players to interact with.
You want to make sure to let your players know. You might have a bunch of stuff on your map, but at the same time, if your players are going to get bogged down in looking at the map and only thinking what's on the map is what exists there, make sure to let them know that maybe there is trees and fauna that isn't that well displayed on the map, but if you ask around, maybe they do exist, so that they can do whatever creative things they can think of too, and really further fleshing out their exploration of that area.
For digital maps, it's going to be super easy for you to just put something on the map, no problem. But for physical maps, there's lots of different like stickers or actual models that you can use to create the scene as well. And there's a gigantic rabbit hole of different kinds of accessories in that vein if you want to go down it.
So we've hinted at the last one throughout this entire video, and now it's going to be, coming full circle at this point. It is going to be huge to be able to create non-linear storylines. If you want your players to be able to explore freely and to be able to reward them awesomely and give them threats that are perfectly thematic for the areas they're exploring, all of that is going to be heavily dependent on you finding ways to create non-linear storylines.
If you want to think about it like a random number generator fog of war. They're walking through and all of a sudden you've randomly generated this temple. You've randomly generated a town or a city, sea, rivers, whatever. Something to interact with that your story just happens to take place in or around and your players are able to interact with as well. And oftentimes your players are the ones who are able to provoke you into making that kind of connection.
I've noticed myself completely changing all of my plans DMing a campaign just because of one or two simple player actions that I never thought of. It happens. And the truth is, when it happens, it normally becomes better than you wanted it to be and expected it to be.
Yeah, it's the old saying, 2 heads are better than one. You just didn't know you were collaborating.
Yep. You didn't know that the DM head was actually just a Hydra using all of the player heads. Just stealing their ideas. So to be able to do that well, you're going to have to find ways to provide multiple paths to reach the same goal of proceeding through the campaign. This is kind of simple. In a lot of ways, you can just have intention, like the players are going to meet an NPC that is super smart and is going to be able to tell them things that they don't know. If they're in a town that is like a high magic town or civilization, that might be a wizard that they meet. If they decided to go explore the swamp that had an interesting name that you put on the map earlier, then that might be a swamp hag. She's smarter than everyone else around. She's basically a wizard of the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
Or for that matter, if they're exploring insanely tall and shrill cliffs and mountains, they might find a super enlightened monk there. So all you needed to know was the players needed to meet a smart NPC. And you've got tons of options there with whatever they end up exploring.
And this is actually a really good way to make your world feel alive. And you won't end up wasting a lot of the DM preparation when it comes to things like, I had a specific character in a specific castle at a specific place and they didn't go there. Now I'm mad. You should have just had a very brief outline, and wherever the story went, that's where they're able to interact with. And it's not necessarily that you only have one story or storyline to interact with, but you have a couple of threads that they're able to pick at, and you choose what thread they're pulling at when they're pulling at it.
Yes, that's perfect. And if you find that your players are loving the fact that you're getting better at showing the exploration pillar of D&D, and your players are really diving into this concept, then don't be afraid to let go of what you've planned to build or change anything depending on where the players are going. The game isn't run for you completely. You're a DM, you're supposed to enjoy it, but you're running the game for your players. So don't feel like you have to write a book that you like. It's going to be better for the players if you write a book that they like, which for me personally as a DM is more fun.
If you guys did like this video, make sure to like, comment, or subscribe for more. And if you can think of anything else to add on to this video, make sure you leave it in the comments. But until next time, guys, we will see you all later. Goodbye.